Hey, 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 how are we all doing today? Okay, the time has arrived for me to bring the big review you've all been waiting for, and that, of course, is for Wicked, Part 1, might I say, directed by Jon M, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jonathan Bailey, Ethan Slater, Bowen Yang, Marissa Bode, Peter Dinklage, Michelle Yeoh, and Jeff Goldblum. And of course, this is the origin story to the Wicked Witch of the West, aka Elphaba, and her friendship with Glinda, the Good Witch, and takes place years before Wizard of Oz, based on the wildly popular stage show, of course with music by Stephen Schwartz. And this is something that I'll be right up front about. I have never seen the Broadway production, and I'm not too familiar with the show itself altogether. Though, of course, this was still one of my most anticipated films of the year, if you remember, all the way back to January. And that's because, I grew up in musical theater, so there were a lot of people who always, sang, quoted Wicked, all that sort of stuff. And the fact that the director, Jon M, directed my favorite film of 2021, In the Heights, which still stands to this day. I just rewatched it this summer, and I still think it's phenomenal. I still get moved by it every time. So this is something that I think was very, very much worth investing in. Considering Chu's last couple of films, Crazy Rich Asians and In the Heights, he keeps growing in stature as a filmmaker, and it would seem that on paper he was the perfect guy to direct this movie. And I certainly think that is true, because Wicked, you could tell that there was so much passion and love that went into creating this adaptation of such a beloved staged musical, because this has been gestating for over 20 years. I mean, I think the Broadway show premiered in 2003, so yeah, this was a long time coming, and it's kind of surprised that it took this long to come out. Now, if we're comparing this Glicked phenomenon to Barbenheimer, I certainly think that this is the Oppenheimer to Barbie. And yes, I did like this more than Barbie, with that being said, but this is no Oppenheimer. I'm going to be straight up, but this is a really, really good musical film. There are so many parts of this movie that are just so awe-inspiring and just so deeply moving and engrossing, and a lot of this film I was really, really loving. I think the humor throughout this entire film especially doesn't always work, especially near the beginning, but a lot of it was so consistent that I was just eating up all the jokes and a lot of the comic timing from the actors, and we'll get into that in a little bit, of course. But this definitely feels like so much was thrown at the screen in a good way. The production design of this movie is absolutely insane. I mean, they rebuild all the locations from The Wizard of Oz and then some, at least the ones featured in the movie. You get Munchkin Land, you get Oz, built from the ground up. And of course there is some blue screen, which is a major complaint people have had with this film, but I don't think that takes away from the absolute spectacle that was put together and thrown onto the screen, because this is absolutely incredible how they rebuild the land of Oz. And I think that this is going to win the Oscar for production design. I mean, really taking us into a world that I suppose we haven't visited in this capacity since 85 years ago. I mean, I know that there's been other stuff like Oz and Great and Powerful, but that has nothing on this film right here, because this is just such an incredible feat from a technical standpoint. I also really want to point out the costume designs as well. It's so inspired, everything, even like down to the little bow ties have like very interesting patterns on them. It is unbelievable the amount of specificity and detail in every single frame of this movie, which I sometimes wish translated over to the lighting, because of course, Jon M is so deft with the camera, the way he directs these musical numbers, these long takes that just play out over time, the kinetic energy he uses through the editing to put all of this together. It is always been ever present, especially after watching In the Heights. I knew that he was going to bring that to the table, but I think the biggest complaint being levied at this film is the fact that a lot of this feels very white balanced, but not in a good way. It feels very washed out and overexposed in a couple shots. There was only one time where it really bothered me, where I was like, yeesh, I mean, that just does not look that great. Why did they put this in this movie? And this is the only time I will ever compare this to Bowling for Columbine. But there's a shot in that documentary that's just so washed out where I'm like, this is yucky. Why did Michael Moore decide to put this in this movie? And it reminded me of that for just a second. Now, it's not quite that egregious, but yeah, it still definitely stood out to me in not the greatest of ways, but I don't think it detracted from this overall narrative where you're really getting to learn about Elphaba and Galinda and the origins of the characters that they would, soon evolve into the iconic characters that we've known for almost a century at this point. And it is just amazing what these two actresses do with this. Now, Ariana Grande, ever since this movie premiered, everyone's saying, oh, Oscar buzz for Ariana Grande, which on paper sounds kind of insane, right? This massive mega pop star getting into the Oscars for a role that you could say is pretty early in her film career. She doesn't have too many credits to her name yet. Of course, Don't Look Up, which I thought she was hysterical in, but even with the promise of that small performance, it didn't entirely surprise me when I saw her in this, and I was blown away by just how great of a comedic talent she is. Every little nuance she does with her face, the way she turns her head, it is just so spot on perfect, and I think she really is a standout in this movie. I think maybe the standout to a lot of people, because everyone's saying she might even win the Oscar, which would be even crazier, because you look at the other acting fields this year, like I'm pretty sure Adrian Brody's going to win, I'm pretty sure Mikey Madison's going to win, I'm pretty sure Kieran Culkin is going to win. But supporting actress is the one category where it feels like a bit of a toss-up. And so I definitely think, since there's so much goodwill being thrown at this movie, I think Ariana Grande could ride that wave to an Oscar win. Now, would I put her in my top 5? Not personally, but I certainly wouldn't be upset if she does get into the field. It isn't very crowded, all things considered, and it is really a revelatory performance in a lot of ways. I'm not saying it's the absolute best of the year, but I definitely think that she is absolutely great in this, and I can't wait to see her again, because this performance could definitely grow on me. But for me, the real standout was Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba, because she's required to do a lot more emotionally in a very subtle way a lot of the time. And I think Cynthia Erivo really displays her range throughout this entire film, especially during the musical numbers, because we all know she's an amazing singer. But my goodness, there's so many awe-inspiring moments, like when she sings The Wizard and I at the beginning was really the first moment of the movie where I was like, okay, I could end up loving this. And, of course, her rendition of Defying Gravity at the end of this movie is just absolutely incredible. It's such a high note to end the film on, obviously. And I think that as great as she is, it is going to be tough for her to crack the Best Actress field, because I don't think her performance is quite big enough to kind of make an impact in the way a lot of these other contenders we're talking about are. But I certainly think she could get in, and I'd be like, okay, that's cool. I really do love Cynthia Erivo's work here. One of her best performances in years. And talk about singing voice. I mean, Ariana Grande, we knew she could do the whistle tone register, all this stuff. But my goodness, her voice is almost operatic. Like, it was made for musical theater, and she's able to shift into so many different gears with that. Now I'm shifting over to Ariana Grande, coincidentally enough, going back to how great she is. But I truly believe, like, even seeing her in interviews, the way she's transformed to this character, it is kind of uncanny. And I really love the two of them when they're on screen together, which really lead to the most emotional moments in the entire film in a very, very riveting and surprising way. Their relationship is really the beating heart of the film that centers you into the emotionality of the story and why you want to keep watching to see these characters who, at the beginning of the movie, don't really like each other too much, evolve in so many surprising ways. And I absolutely love that about this. But there's so many great performers in here. I have to mention Bowen Yang. He's kind of like the gay sidekick, which I know is kind of a trope we've seen many times. But he just makes all these quips that are just so funny throughout the entire film. And I really loved a lot of the jokes he made. But Jonathan Bailey was the one to me where I was like, wow, this guy is phenomenal, whether it be his absolute charisma that just pours off every single frame he's present, and also just his insane abilities as a singer and dancer. Of course, Dancing Through Life, which is one of the standouts of the film for me. I think maybe the best musical number when it comes to staging and production, all of that stuff. He just absolutely blows the roof off of this movie with a very insane bisexual energy, which I thought was very suggestive and funny. It was very surprising. But I really, really do love his work here. I think he's better in this than Denzel in Gladiator 2. I'm going to say it. And look, I don't expect him to get a Best Supporting Actor nod, but if he did, I'd be like, okay, I guess so. I mean, he really, really is such a standout, and especially his scenes with Erivo and also Grande independently are really, really special, I think, and definitely some of the best moments in the movie. Now, of course, you have veterans like Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum. Michelle Yeoh is good. I mean, it's Michelle Yeoh, you know, but she doesn't really get as many moments to shine. And Jeff Goldblum is playing Jeff Goldblum, just as the Wizard of Oz. But, you know, he's always entertaining, and I think he's great for what he does. And the thing that really, I think, makes their roles effective is how it plays into Elphaba's overall narrative. There's a lot of things going on in the story, especially a lot dealing with animal rights in Oz, and that mainly has to do with the character Professor Dilliman, who's played by Peter Dinklage, and he's a goat character, he's a CGI character, and we'll get into that as well, but I think he's really great when he's on screen as this character. But what they have to say about animal rights is definitely going to strike a chord with a lot of people, especially in PETA. And also in the story, but also what it's saying about these authoritarian figures who kind of stand for this big ideal, but, you know, kind of use their platform in ways to control the masses and to also scapegoat certain people who they don't like to push their agenda forward. Sounds familiar? Yeah, I think it might be. So I think this movie's definitely going to hit a lot of people in many, many ways, but I really appreciate that the movie goes for these broader themes, because it could have just been, you know, they could have watered it down for the audiences here, but no, they really get into all that stuff. Even though I wish that they would have gotten into it a little more. Because this film suffers from what I like to call Part 1 syndrome. And I think it's the same exact problems the first Dune had. Where the movie doesn't feel as self-contained as it should. And it definitely feels like it's just setting up for a sequel. And yeah, it's pretty evident. Though I think you could make the argument that this movie deserved to be split into two parts, and I'm okay with that. You definitely could have cut out quite a bit of this movie. I also didn't like some of the build-up in the first act. It was just a little cheesy and over the top for my liking. But I think once the jokes really started to land, it really found its groove, and especially when it gets more deeper into the relationship of Elphaba and Glinda, that's when the movie really soars. But I think that, coupled with the fact that there's a lot of subplots with a lot of characters that don't really go anywhere in this film, I'm sure they are going to get paid off in the second, but that's the thing, it is noticeable, and so are a lot of the visual effects in this movie as well. This definitely has gotten a lot of criticisms for feeling like a Marvel movie. Now, I think it's a little bit above that level in regards to the production present on screen, but you definitely get some visuals that are very reminiscent of that, and I almost wish that they kind of went back and resorted to like practical costumes like the original Wizard of Oz, because it would have felt more grounded in realism. And I get this is 2024, it's not 1939, but at the same time the practicality is most certainly felt when you do see it on the screen. And so I would have loved to see a bit more of that, but I mean, I guess you can only expect so much in this day and age. But regardless, I think that this is really such a strong start to this two-parter. And of course, like Dune Part 2, I really think the sequel is going to be one of the absolute best films of 2025 when it hits almost exactly a year from now, because I hear it gets so much darker and so much more interesting from an emotional standpoint, and I'm sure we're going to see the resolution of a lot of this stuff finally come to full view and give us a very full portrait of this movie. I don't think that really will alter my stance on Part 1 though, even though I will say I do like this a bit more than Dune, because I think there is more of an emotional core in this film that Dune didn't have. So I think the second one is obviously going to be one of my most anticipated films of next year, almost shot right to the top of the list, and you'll find out where it is soon enough. But really, I think that this is going to be a massive hit. Judging from my theater's reaction, it was absolutely packed on Saturday, and you could hear people clapping, kind of like reacting to some of the big moments. Like the theater kids were creaming their pants. I'm not going to lie to you, and I was hearing it. We were all hearing it. And some people were like, oh, this is like the best movie ever. And I'm like, is it really? I mean, I don't think so, but maybe that's because I'm a jaded cinephile at this point. Who knows? But I really do think that this is very much worth everybody's time, as much as it deserves, considering the love and effort that was put into the final product. And I'm going to give Wicked an 8 out of 10. Now, I do admit there's a caveat that this could go up to an 8.5. I don't think much higher than that at all, because once I watch it again, maybe we'll play better. But even with that being said, I do think that this is something that you should all see in theaters, maybe even if you're not a big musical fan, because it is going to be a cultural phenomenon. I truly believe that, and I think it firmly has cemented itself into the Oscar race, into the Best Picture race. It's not going to be one of the strongest Best Picture movies throughout the season. I don't even think it will win, but it's definitely one of those populist movies that everyone is going to relate to for the most part, and I think Academy members are really going to take to it. And so, yeah, definitely expect this to get a lot of nominations at the Oscars, not for cinematography though, but I definitely think this is one to watch out for the rest of the year. But yeah, guys, let me know what you thought about Wicked down in the comments below. Is it one of your favorite movies of the year, or were you let down by this long-awaited adaptation? Please tell me, and please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Going to be a lot more reviews like this one. I'm kind of cramming a lot of these movie reviews in right now and trying to get them out to you, so please be on the lookout for my next one, which is going to be The Piano Lesson, directed by Malcolm Washington, which is now on Netflix. There's more on that soon and many things to come, and I will see you guys in the next one.